Nobody expected today's news to shake the entire Steelers community, but here we are. A quiet afternoon turned into one of the most shocking injury updates of the season, one that could directly shape the Steelers' push in Week 11 and beyond. Stay locked in, because what you're about to hear is not only surprising, it changes the conversation. Welcome in, Steelers family. A major update has just dropped regarding Aaron Rodgers, an update reported moments ago by Adam Schefter and Tom Pelissero, and it's one the Steelers absolutely did not want to hear. After going back through the Steelers' Week 11 win over the Cincinnati Bengals, I've gathered some important notes, but this Rodgers situation instantly became the headline. But before we dive into the latest breaking news, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and don't forget to turn on the bell icon so you never miss the biggest Steelers updates. Now let's get into it. According to multiple reports, the Steelers fear Aaron Rodgers suffered what has been described as a slight break in his wrist late in the first half against Cincinnati. Early word suggests the injury is not expected to be long-term. That alone gives Pittsburgh some relief. Even more important, the fracture is in Rodgers' non-throwing hand. If this were the throwing wrist, we'd be talking about a very different, much more serious timeline. Rodgers was spotted wearing a bulky wrist brace after the game. And here's the part that really shows who he is as a competitor. He reportedly pushed the Steelers' medical staff to let him return to the field. Once the X-rays confirmed the fracture, that option was off the table. Tomorrow, Rodgers will go through additional tests and evaluations to determine the exact severity and recovery window. The brace he wore looked significant, so the next few days will be crucial in figuring out how soon he can transition to something lighter and eventually get back into game action. The big question now becomes, when Rodgers returns, how limited will he be? Will he be able to take snaps under center? Or will the Steelers need to rely heavily on shotgun formations until that wrist fully stabilizes? These next updates will matter a lot. Stay with me, because more news is on the way, and you won't want to miss what comes next. The real question now is simple but massive. What kind of offense can the Steelers realistically run if Rodgers isn't able to work under center? Because the truth is, this system isn't built to live in shotgun all afternoon. And that's where the conversation suddenly shifts toward Mason Rudolph. If Rodgers is limited, I'd seriously consider giving Rudolph the reins, at least for a short stretch. We've seen quarterbacks with his style thrive in Arthur Smith's approach, efficient, steady, calm in the pocket. And today, Rudolph showed exactly why that matters. He went 12, 4, 16, missed a couple throws, sure, but overall, he looked sharp. He made the right reads, distributed the ball with confidence, and stayed composed when the pocket tightened. You can win games with that. And let's be honest, if Rodgers can only operate from shotgun, that creates a real dilemma. Because taking snaps under center is a core part of what this offense wants to establish. And when your center is known for firing off some of the strongest snaps in the league, you need a quarterback who can physically handle that. Right now, that might not be Rodgers. The next few days will tell us a lot. If the injury truly is minor and he can manage it with a brace, there's still a possibility he plays next week. And Chicago? That's not just any game for Rodgers. He's always circled that matchup, one of the last big rivalry atmospheres he might experience before retirement. Missing that would sting badly. But if he can't go, I'm not losing sleep. I trust Mason Rudolph to keep the offense functional. I trust this defense even more. They've strung together 3 strong performances, locked down the perimeter, and shown the toughness this team needs right now. And before I move on, I have to correct something from earlier. James Pierre absolutely earned a game ball. It slipped through the cracks in the heat of breaking everything down, but he was outstanding. And Joey Porter Jr.? Outside of a few penalties this season, he's been a force. Man coverage, tight windows, shutting down top receivers. Exactly what this team needs from him. More updates coming. Stay with me. Brandon Echols deserves some recognition today. Even while battling through injuries, he held his ground in the slot and gave the defense exactly what it needed. And the safety pairing of Jalen Ramsey and Kyle Duggar? Strong, disciplined, and reliable all afternoon. But let's circle back to the most delicate part of this entire situation, the quarterback room. The Steelers aren't walking into a soft stretch. They're heading straight into a 3-week gauntlet. Chicago, who pulled out another win today, Buffalo, waiting at Acrisure, and Baltimore, on the road, in one of the most unforgiving environments in football. If Mason Rudolph ends up starting 2, maybe even all 3 of these games, and the offense suddenly finds rhythm under him, the conversation changes fast. Because if Rudolph helps deliver wins against playoff-level teams, it becomes very difficult to pull him off the field just because Rodgers gets healthy. Now, to be clear, Rudolph didn't show enough today to declare him the unquestioned starter moving forward. But give him 2 or 3 more steady, efficient performances. Give this offense a groove it hasn't seen in weeks. At that point, momentum speaks louder than depth charts. This is a massive opportunity for Rudolph. He fits Arthur Smith's system, maybe not perfectly, but comfortably. Like a more limited version of Ryan Tannehill. Not as mobile, not as dynamic on the ground, but proficient under center, capable of attacking downfield, and mechanically familiar. He's not a top-tier quarterback. He's not in the top 20, maybe not even top 25. But for this offense, he can be effective. And right now, effectiveness is the one thing Pittsburgh desperately needs, especially after Rodgers struggles since his breakout performance against Cincinnati a month ago. The offense simply hasn't looked right. Still, if Rodgers is cleared next week, there's no doubt he'll fight to be on that field in Chicago. That matchup means something to him, maybe more than he'll admit. And after 2 down weeks, he'll want to prove he's still the guy, that the job isn't slipping into someone else's hands. There isn't a quarterback controversy today. Not yet. But give Rudolph 2 or 3 strong games. Give this team some momentum. Give this offense a spark. And suddenly the conversation becomes a lot more complicated. Stay with me. So keep a close eye on how this develops. Because even with Mason Rudolph stepping in, today's game revealed something deeper about the Steelers, something that goes far beyond who lines up at quarterback. This offense is living on yards after the catch at a level you almost never see in the NFL. Before today, nearly 70% of the Steelers' passing yardage came after the reception, already an absurd number. And against Cincinnati, it looked even more extreme, pushing well over the 80% mark. That means most of the production isn't coming from explosive throws. It's coming from what happens after the ball is in a receiver's hands. It's the short stuff, the quick hitters, the underneath routes, Darnell Washington plowing through defenders, Jalen Warren slipping tackles, Kenny Gainwell turning simple plays into big ones. Meanwhile, DK Metcalf is getting doubled snap after snap, and neither Rowan Wilson nor Calvin Austin is consistently shaking loose to punish defenses for focusing on him. If this team wants to be taken seriously in January, this has to change. You cannot survive in the postseason by asking your receivers and running backs to carry the entire offense after the catch. This team needs vertical plays. They need chunk passes. They need someone to win downfield. Play action should help, especially with the under-center run game working, but it only matters if someone besides DK starts winning routes that threaten defenses deep. And that brings the spotlight directly onto Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin. One of them, ideally both, has to step up. Maybe Marquez Valdez-Scantling gets involved later, but right now the responsibility falls on the young guys. Roman flashed today with that huge 3rd-and-long conversion, but one play isn't enough when you're getting legitimate WR2 snaps. One catch isn't going to change how teams defend Metcalf. If this offense wants to evolve, wants to open lanes, wants to move away from depending on yards after catch miracles, then Wilson and Austin must rise to the moment. The potential is there, but the consistency? That still has to show up. More to break down ahead. Stay with me. If today was any indication, maybe Roman Wilson is finally warming up. Maybe that flash becomes something steady. But right now, all we can do is wait and see whether he builds on it or fades back into inconsistency. Shifting gears for a moment, the Ravens pulled out a win today, but not without chaos. Shatter Sanders had to step in for an injured Dylan Gabriel and went just 4 for 16. It was rough. And honestly, seeing that performance only reinforces how disastrous it would have been if the Steelers had spent a first-round pick on him, like some people were pleading for months ago. Cleveland actually had Baltimore on the ropes for a good chunk of the game. The Ravens didn't look sharp at all. They're vulnerable, very beatable. Still, they've now won 4 straight and sit at 5-5, just 1 game behind Pittsburgh. That means next week becomes massive for the division race. Steelers in Chicago, Ravens hosting the Jets. Pittsburgh should absolutely win that matchup in the Windy City, no excuses. Before wrapping up, there's something that needs to be said about this Steelers offense, especially the tight end room. Darnell Washington and Pat Freiermuth bring a physical, dynamic presence that changes games. Pat only recorded 1 catch today, but it was a strong 19-yard run after catch play. Washington, meanwhile, was everywhere, second on the team in receiving, breaking tackles, making impact plays in key moments. And then, there's Jonas Smith. 2 targets, 0 catches, no blocking presence, a costly face mask. At this point, there's no argument left to keep him in a starting role. Arthur Smith may trust him, but trust doesn't win snaps. Production does. And Jonnu just isn't giving this offense anything. He's not creating yards after contact, not winning routes, not securing contested throws, and not giving support in the run game. If the Steelers want their best players on the field, Jonnu Smith has to be moved down the depth chart. Tight end 3, maybe even less, depending on the jumbo sets. When Washington and Freiermuth are performing at this level, there's no justification for keeping an ineffective player above them. One last note from today, Jaylen Warren suffered an ankle injury. The extent isn't clear yet, but we'll likely have answers on Tomlin Tuesday. The hope is that it's minor, because losing Warren for any stretch would be a significant blow. Plenty more still unfolding. Stay with me. And here's where things get really interesting, because the door just swung wide open for Caleb Johnson. Yes, he had that rookie slip up with the face mask on what could have been a highlight run, but don't let that overshadow what's happening on film. Over the last 3 weeks, in a tiny sample size, this kid has flashed real juice. Vision, burst, toughness, the kind of traits that don't lie. Even when Jaylen Warren returns, I honestly want to see Caleb get more early down work. Let Jaylen handle those third downs where he thrives, and let the young guy keep building momentum. And look, Kenny Gainwell reminded everyone he's no afterthought with 2 touchdowns today. But long-term, Caleb Johnson looks like the future at that early down role. You can feel it. And speaking of toughness, Brick Jones earned every ounce of respect today. He battled through a groin injury all week, then a foot issue popped up mid-game, and he still pushed through. Was he perfect? No, but he fought, and he held his own. Tomorrow's film will tell the full story, but the grit? That was obvious. Now flip to the defensive side, because this is where Pittsburgh completely changed the script from Week 7. Back then, they lined up in single high, played a bunch of man coverage against Jamar Chase and Joe Flacco, and got torched. This week, total transformation. They leaned heavily into split safety shells with Ramsey and Duggar patrolling the deep halves. Then Chuck Clark rotated in late. The result? Flacco had to hold the ball longer, hesitate more, and guess more. On 29 of his 41 dropbacks, the Steelers were in split safety pre-snap. That's exactly how you force a veteran quarterback into uncomfortable territory. And the execution, few. James Pierre and Joey Porter Jr. were outstanding. Ramsey and Duggar once again looked like one of the smartest, most instinctive safety duos in the league. Brandon Echols quietly had his best game in weeks, far fewer coverage losses than he had against the Colts or Chargers. This defense is trending upward in a real way, and today they punched a Bengals offense in the mouth, an offense that's been rolling since Flacco arrived. This wasn't luck. This was discipline, smart scheming, and players winning their matchups. If we're being honest, what the Steelers' defense put on tape today was miles ahead of what we saw in that ugly outing against Green Bay, and pretty much any other low point this season. They were sharp, disciplined, and explosive. 2 defensive touchdowns don't happen by luck. That's a unit that has finally figured out who it is. Credit to Terrell Austin and that entire group for tightening every screw over the last month. They look like a defense peaking at exactly the right time. Now, let's shift to something that could quietly shape the next chapter of this team. Before the game, Jerry Dulac shared an update on Asani Samuel Jr., and it gave us a clearer picture of what's going on behind the scenes. The staff loves his recovery progress. That's why they brought him in, but he hasn't played since Week 4 of last season. That's almost a full year away from live action. They want him back to true practice speed, then game speed, before throwing him into the fire. And honestly, that approach makes sense. When James Pierre is playing at this level, there's no need to rush anyone. Pierre has been targeted relentlessly over the last 3 weeks, and every time quarterbacks think they've found a mismatch, he slams the door shut. Long arms, physicality, smart eyes, confident technique. He's checking every box. And this didn't come out of nowhere. He flashed in camp, he flashed in preseason, and now he's stacking real, sustainable NFL reps. That makes the cornerback picture complicated. Asani Samuel Jr. is an outside corner by trade. If he's going to carve out a role, the Steelers need to get him fully up to speed, then find the right spot for him. Slot work? Backup outside role? A rotational package? It's all on the table. But the staff won't, and shouldn't, disrupt a player who's playing lights out just to force a name onto the field. What they can't do is wait too long. If he stays on the practice squad, another team dealing with injuries, like Philadelphia, could swoop in. So next week, elevating him to the active roster feels like the safest move, even if his game snaps come later. That balancing act, Protecting a valuable player while letting him properly ramp up is going to be fascinating to watch over these next couple of weeks. And with all of this unfolding, there's still the looming question around Aaron Rodgers. Early indications are pointing toward a slight wrist fracture, and tomorrow's evaluations should bring clarity. The timing couldn't be worse, with a brutal stretch of playoff-caliber opponents ahead. But here's the twist. If Mason Rudolph and this offense start cooking the way they flashed today, the conversations in Pittsburgh could get very, very interesting. This season's drama is nowhere near over. In fact, it feels like it's just getting started.